When Corey Haim first revealed the story of the horrific treatment he suffered as a child star, many believed he was talking about Charlie Sheen. Ultimately, even more information came out after his untimely death, and the truth was much darker than anybody knew. Corey Haim could be a poster boy for child actors who failed to launch as adults. It was addiction that got him in the end, but there are some sinister accusations to explain Haim's tragic fall from grace. Growing up, Corey's mother noticed something worrisome about her son. He lacked confidence and seemed painfully introverted. And if you're a shy teenager, the last place you want to be is in the spotlight. But his mother thought that thrusting him onto a stage would cure his shyness. She signed him up for improv classes and even mime lessons. Unlike Corey, his older sister, Carrie, did want to act. It soon became his job to go with her to auditions. While Carrie was met mostly with rejection, Corey got the opposite reaction. Even though he wasn't auditioning, producers wanted him. First, he did some commercials, and then he got his first role, a Canadian educational TV show called The Edison Twins. It wouldn't be long before he made the massive leap to Hollywood. In 1984, when he was 13, he won a role in a movie, a thriller called Firstborn. In it, Corey plays the son of a woman who begins seeing a not-so-nice guy named Sam, played by Peter Weller. Although this should have been an exciting milestone for Corey, the set of the film proved to be terrifying, all thanks to his co-star's disturbing scare tactics. On his first day on set, Corey made the mistake of trying to compliment Peter Weller on his acting. Weller, who played the boy's violent stepfather, grabbed the barely teenage Corey, threw him against a wall, and demanded that he never speak to him again on set. Weller later blamed his behaviour on his method acting, but Corey found it hard to recover from the ordeal. Even though his parents divorced in 1982, Corey was still hurting. At a crew party for the movie, he watched as his parents danced, but not with each other. On seeing his parents with other partners, he burst into tears. After a handful of small roles, Corey finally got a lead part in 1985's Silver Bullet. Then he won a Young Artist Award for his performance in the TV movie A Time to Live with Liza Minnelli. Once Corey hired a Hollywood agent, he stepped into a lead role almost immediately. Lucas came out in 1986, and Corey was the titular character. Years later, his friend and fellow 80s actor Corey Feldman said that there was some serious trouble on the set of Lucas. Feldman alleges that co-star Charlie Sheen molested Corey Haim sometime during the shoot. Of course, Sheen denied these allegations, and he had someone surprising in his corner. Believe it or not, it was Corey's sister, Carrie, who stood up for Sheen. She said that Sheen was too busy with her to be messing with her little brother. The accusation against the actor seemed to disappear. Then, in 2017, Sheen was once again accused of assaulting Corey Haim while filming Lucas. This time the accusation came from actor Dominic Brascia, who worked and became friends with Corey on The Lost Boys. Corey's mother, Judy, decided to speak out. She said that nothing could have happened on the set of Lucas because she would have known about it. She then accused Dominic Brascia of being the one who abused her son. This sounded exactly like what Sheen needed to hear, and that's why some people believe he paid her to say it. In spite of what may or may not have happened on the set of Lucas, Corey's performance ignited interest. With all the excitement around his career, the young actor decided to leave Canada and move to Los Angeles. Around this time, Joel Schumacher was looking for young actors for his vampire film, The Lost Boys. Corey was soon cast, and he met someone who would change his life. Another Corey by the name of Feldman. Most of the other actors in The Lost Boys were old enough to party, but the Coreys just hung out together watching movies. A friendship began to blossom, but it was also a friendship destined for incredible highs and unspeakable lows. The Lost Boys turned out to be a hit, and many still regard it as a classic. The film was also the starting point of a film partnership between Haim and Feldman. It was at this point that people started calling them the two Coreys. Haim had found a friend and someone to star in movies with. What could go wrong? In short, everything. The director of their second film together, License to Drive's Greg Beeman, said that the Coreys liked to goof around on set, and sometimes they would disappear altogether. But he did add that they always showed up for work on time. It sounded like just a couple of teenagers having fun, but there was something much darker going on. License to Drive required Haim to drive a car, but there was a problem. He only had a learner's permit, which meant there had to be an adult in the car when he was driving. To keep within the law, the producers had an adult hidden in the back seat whenever Haim had to drive. But it turned out there were other reasons for Haim not being suitable to drive a car. He later said that while making the film, his struggle with addiction was already an issue. During a stint in rehab, doctors gave him prescription medication to deal with the withdrawal symptoms. Thus began a serious issue with Valium. The young actor began popping up to 85 pills a day. Fans were starting to notice that Haim had a drug problem, and this had an effect on his movies, as in, nobody wanted to see them. After losing a good portion of his fanbase, Haim started to make direct-to-video films. In one of them, his co-star was his girlfriend Nicole Eggert, of Baywatch fame. Her days were spent on set, but her nights were spent doing something entirely different. She and Haim spent most nights in the ER dealing with his addiction. The two did eventually get engaged, but broke up before tying the knot. In spite of his addiction problems, Haim still had a fair chunk of change in the bank and decided it was time to get a decent place to live. He found a mansion in the Hancock Park neighbourhood of LA. For some reason, he bought the house with his manager, Michael Bass. Sharing a house with his business manager was a mistake from the beginning. Bass had spent 2 years in prison after being convicted of swindling and didn't seem to have learned his lesson. Bass intentionally rushed the purchase of the house so he and Haim could host a charity benefit for Toys for Tots. According to sources, the benefit was a big scam, but this was only the first red flag of many. About a year after moving into the house together, Haim tried to fire Bass as his manager, but Bass wasn't leaving. Haim ended up not just firing him, but also firing at him with a BB gun. Bass went to the authorities and Haim ended up behind bars. The other Corey had to swoop in and pay $250 to bail him out. A year after this episode, Haim's friend Corey Feldman defended Michael Jackson as he faced disturbing allegations in court. When Jackson settled out of court with his 13-year-old accuser, he wanted to thank Feldman for his support. He invited Feldman and Haim to spend time at his Neverland Ranch. This was the first time Haim had met Jackson, and this friendship was headed for controversy. Over the next years, Haim and Feldman appeared in a large number of rubbish straight-to-video films. In an effort to get back into the mainstream, Haim auditioned to play Robin in Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever. He probably hoped that Schumacher would remember when they made The Lost Boys together. Apparently not, because he cast Chris O'Donnell to play Batman's sidekick instead. Clearly, Haim was counting on help from friends like Schumacher, but his behaviour made this impossible. Still hurting from his failure to get the part in Batman, Haim agreed to appear in Feldman's directorial debut, Busted. During filming, his addiction spiralled out of control. Even though the film was a silly, low-budget comedy, Feldman took it seriously. He realised that he couldn't have a lead actor who was frequently absent and even occasionally high on set. Feldman had to fire his best friend. In 1996, Haim was about to make Paradise Bar and needed to fill out his insurance form. He hesitated over the question about any pre-existing medical conditions because addiction was on the list. He didn't tick the box, and trouble soon followed. When the producers realised they had a user on their set, they checked Haim's insurance form. They then got Lloyd's of London to sue Haim, and he had to pay them $375,000, all for not ticking a box. Haim simply had to add the money he owed Lloyd's of London to a pile of other debts. He owed the IRS $100,000 and another $100,000 to various other creditors. And what about his assets? Haim had $100 in cash, an Alfa Romeo Spider, his clothes, and a small pension fund. To make matters worse, he was unemployable due to his addiction problem. In July '97, Haim did the only thing that he could. He filed for bankruptcy. To get out of his financial hole, he returned to Canada. There he made a film called Without Malice. Filmed in a remote part of Saskatchewan, the tiny town only had one bar, and apparently Haim was there until closing time almost every night. He also behaved strangely on set. He would constantly stop the filming in order to call home and make sure his dog was still alive. This erratic behaviour made Haim stand out, but not in a good way. By 2001, Haim had hit rock bottom, and True Hollywood Story was there to help rub it in his face. The TV special showed Haim living in Santa Monica in a simple apartment with his mother. A local pawnbroker told a story of Haim begging for $3 just so he could buy a slice of pizza. In 2003, comedian David Spade made Dickie Roberts, former child star. While Dickie Roberts is a piece of fiction, the film is populated with many real stars that failed to make a successful leap to adult stardom. Haim and Feldman are there, along with some of the kids from The Brady Bunch, 8 is Enough, and others. For Haim, it was a way to make some much-needed cash. Even though he wasn't really making movies anymore, in 2006 VH1 ranked him as number 8 in their list of greatest teen stars. This gave Haim an idea. If people were still interested in him after all these years, what about a reality TV show about the two Coreys? The idea was to have Haim living with Feldman and his wife and watch as Haim tries to get his career going again. Audiences who tuned in to the two Coreys got a shock. They barely recognised the former teen heartthrob, as Haim's addictions had severely altered the way he looked. But this ended up being the least eye-opening aspect of the two Coreys. The series was about to open up some very real and painful wounds, and it wasn't going to be pretty. At some point in the show, Haim opened up about a man who touched him inappropriately when he was 14. The man was a friend of Feldman's, and Feldman knew about the situation. He knew about it for the 2 years that it continued. After this startling disclosure, the camaraderie between Haim and Feldman disappeared, and the two actors took a hiatus from the two Coreys. Winning a Canadian Gemini Award for his work on the show didn't help Haim economically, so he fell back on his last resort. He attempted to sell tufts of his own hair, and even a tooth, in order to make money. The failing actor needed something to hope for, so he must have felt pretty excited when he heard they were making a sequel to The Lost Boys. Surely he wouldn't even have to audition. After all, he was an original Lost Boy. When Haim asked the producers when they wanted him on set, their reaction devastated him. There was no role for him in the Lost Boys sequel. The producers did offer him a cameo, but Haim showed up on the set impaired, and they sent him home. This apparently served as a wake-up call, and Haim resolved to do better. Against all odds, Haim did actually become a busy actor once again. When the third installment of the Lost Boys franchise came calling, Haim said he didn't have time to participate. He was busy with films like Shark City, Crank High Voltage, American Sunset, and Decisions. Haim was now asking for a clean set in order to avoid temptations, and it seemed to be working. Early in 2010, Haim became ill and complained of having flu-like symptoms. A doctor made a house call and concluded that there was nothing to worry about, he just had the flu. A few days after the doctor's visit, Haim got out of bed but fell directly onto his knees. When his mother found him, he was unconscious. She immediately called for help, and paramedics rushed him to the hospital. In the early hours of the next day, 38-year-old Corey Haim was dead. The doctors called it an accidental overdose. It turned out that Haim had used false names to get prescriptions for medication. It's no surprise doctors assumed it was his misuse of these drugs that caused his death. But the official cause was said to be damage to his lungs and pneumonia. Sadly, Haim's mother didn't have the money for a funeral. Fortunately, the city of Toronto had a fund for destitute cases. In addition to this, a memorabilia site where Haim had sold some personal items stepped up to help pay. In the end, however, it was the funeral home itself that paid to lay Haim to rest. Once it was over, the tragic question arose: what had happened to Corey Haim? Ten years after his death, Corey Feldman released a documentary about the lives of the two Coreys. In it, there are allegations against many men who Feldman says preyed on one or both of them. Feldman also claims that there is a group called Wolfpack that works on discrediting victims like Haim and himself. While many people find Feldman's accusations far-fetched, others believe that something sinister happened to Haim and Feldman. Feldman says that his visit to Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch with Haim consisted mostly of go-kart rides and watching movies. Years later, something more disquieting rose to the surface. Producer of the two Coreys, Ed Meyer, says that he has a recording of Haim saying that Jackson had touched him sometime after that initial meeting. Feldman has since stopped defending the now deceased Jackson. He still contends that he and Haim were victims of high-profile predators, and he's convinced that Hollywood just wants to brush what happened to the two teen stars under the carpet. He may have a point. In the year of Haim's passing, the producers of the Academy Awards omitted his name from the in memoriam section of the Oscars. The forgetting had already begun. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.